All right, that leads us to today's speakers and panel. Unmanned aerial vehicles, otherwise known as drones. Are you ready? And just in the last couple of days, I gathered up a couple of newspaper articles. You can't pick up a newspaper without seeing an article these days. Drones on Capitol radar, drone risks ignored, say some in the FAA. Holiday season, Santa's sleigh carries some drones, U.S. lags behind other nations in drones. I mean, it's all over. It's a fabulous topic. It actually was spawned in the October meeting by Patrick raising a question of the grumpy old VCs for any of you who was in the audience that day. Anyway, a lot of activity, a lot of action, and that is what leads us here to today. So going to my left, the first panelist is Patrick Reardon, who's running national accounts for iAerial. iAerial is a photo and video production company. They specialize in providing professionally stabilized aerial media taken with high-end remote-controlled UAVs, otherwise known as drones, and this is some of the show and tell that they brought over here. It's not often that we have a panel with show and tell features to it, so thanks to Patrick and his group for bringing the gear in the back. In the middle, to my left, Jeff Luther. Jeff is a former Minnesota Deputy Director of Homeland Security. He's a collaborative leader in public safety and Homeland Security. Jeff's experience affords global perspectives and solutions to events that compromise the safety and integrity of our society and infrastructure. And in 2002, Jeff was appointed by the Commissioner of Public Safety as Minnesota's Deputy Director of Homeland Security. Far left, Todd Colton. Todd is the lead aerospace engineer at Fourth Wing Sensors. Todd has been a leader in developing a small unmanned aircraft industry in Minnesota for over a decade, and he's developed military drones for 10 years at Lockheed Martin, as well as spent the last 3 years developing and producing small drones for non-military applications. That's a mouthful. Wow. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your time and being here with us. For those of you who are here with the Grumpy Old Men panels, the first one I did in the spring, I was kind of running the discussion. The second one, when they came back in the fall, it was really more of an audience participation mode. We're here to make this panel for you. So at any point in time, you have a question, raise your hand and we'll work it in. I have some questions here. I'll kick the ball off, but please chime in if you want to ask a specific question of the panel. So, as I mentioned, lots of hype, lots of attention. Anyway, it ranges from Amazon drone home delivery to the TGIF Friday Mistletoe drone promotion. Who heard of that one? So TGIF's had Mistletoe drone promotion this holiday season. They're flying mistletoe around the restaurant. Well, anyway, it went very bad to the extent that one crashed, hit a woman in the face, and snipped off the end of her nose. So, lots of action, lots of stuff here to losing your tip of your nose at TGIFs. So, if we start at the beginning, what's the definition of a UAV? What's really going on in the industry? And what's kind of the state of the state? And I'll just turn it over to the panel and let you go.
Sure, I'll take a... Oh, hello. Okay, this thing is on. Good. I'll take a stab at definition of a UAV and the state of the state and where that's at. So I'm going to say the UAV a lot. Drone is the same thing. I'm learning to embrace the word drone. When I started working on this about a dozen years ago, UAV was the term, unmanned aerial vehicle. It's been through lots of different iterations of that. Unmanned aircraft system, unmanned aerial system. Air Force calls them remote piloted vehicles, which is a pretty good application. There was an effort maybe 5-10 years ago to call them uninhabited aerial vehicles. That didn't stick because it was too many syllables, I think, unfortunately. The media has really globbed onto the word drones. It's a nice short word. It has lots of sexy, exciting, dangerous connotations to it, and I think just the way things work, that might be our word. So I'm trying to say drone. But what is a drone? A drone can range anything from like these small helicopters. There's the the DJI Phantom that iAerial brought, the white one in the back, and then the big brother to that. And we've got our aircraft out there in the lobby there. It's called the Vireo. It's a small, more traditional airplane. It looks like an RC airplane. That's really the exciting thing that we're going to be talking about today, are these what are called small unmanned aircraft or small drones. But it can range all the way up to the large stuff that you hear about, or you heard about the past decade in the news with drone strikes on the military side of things, right? So those are two very different things, what the military applications are for the large unmanned aircraft, and eventually the commercial applications for large unmanned aircraft versus the small unmanned aircraft, which are a little bit closer to hobby or toy grade stuff, but they're not toys. They're very useful professional grade equipment. So I don't. Anybody want to add anything to that?
No, it's good.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
Jeff, just from kind of a security standpoint, kind of state of the state, what's kind of the backdrop to what's going on right now, and what are people talking about?
Well, I think that everybody is concerned when they hear the word drone, and they have a connotation that, somebody's going to be flying in and looking around your windows and spying on you, another government program to spy on its citizens. But it really, there's so many more applications that can be used with the UAVs than just watching people. And for those of us who are somewhat paranoid in the group, let me just say, you can't walk out the door here without being on a camera from someplace. Our whole lives are consumed by cameras.
Like this guy right here, he's a spy.
Yes. And we're being watched all the time. Traffic cameras and business security cameras, and it's just something that we've kind of, if we don't really pay attention to it, it's something that's part of our everyday lives. Now, the drones are a little bit different from the aspect that it's regulated as an aircraft by the FAA. And unfortunately, the regulations were supposed to come out December 31st, and the FAA hasn't written all the regulations yet. So this is a moving target, if you will. It's a wheel that's constantly turning, and the more people that input this process, the business people that want to see drones opened up and used for agriculture, used for orchard, just real estate, for example, taking pictures of videos of multi-million-dollar homes. There's all kinds of applications that way, but those are going to be pretty strictly regulated by the FAA, and you have to receive what's called a certificate of authorization to be able to use the drone for a civil use. Public use requires the same thing, if you're going to use it. And don't just think of, well, the police are going to spy on me. Well, just think of it from an application of a lost child. And the great resource a drone would be to help search, where it would take, 50 or 100 people covering the same ground. Or somebody mentioned I was talking to earlier, lifeguards on the beach could really watch people well and focus on people that are struggling in the water. So there's all kinds of really good applications that drones can be used for, and not just on a homeland security basis.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Patrick, you and your firm are out in the market right now, again on the photo and the video side. What are you seeing, again, in terms of kind of state of the state?
Well, what I want to emphasize is the fact that we went down to a electronic co-op for power, and this is a regional meeting in a trade show, and all these engineers are in their 50s or early 60s that have designed all these immense capabilities of transferring power from one grid to another. Well, all these facilities need maintenance. So the true opportunities in the field for corporations, cities, for them to go up on unreachable areas, the same prudent approach that Jeff was mentioning for public safety, they can do in their functional jobs for pole maintenance to find out exactly if a grid is down, and safety-wise, the cities were coming up to us and saying, well, this is too controversial now. But I said, well, look 5 years down the road when you're going to hire a young man. They're going to have drone flight schools at Dakota Tech. You're going to be looking for this skill set for your city employees to do their daily jobs that make our lives easier. And that's what the tension I was trying to break, and the doors we were trying to pry open.
Todd, from your perspective, what do you see as not only what's happening now, but what might happen in the future and other potential applications and benefits?
Sure. Yeah, so I think I mentioned, I've been doing this for about a dozen years now, and I started off, it was really only military applications. So I worked 10 years at Lockheed Martin, did small unmanned aircraft, for mostly over-the-hill surveillance, down-the-road type of thing. There was a lot of resistance in the military 10, 15 years ago to this new technology, but it really quickly proved itself out. And back then, it was kind of like it is now with the commercial UAV industry, where there was a lot of new companies starting up, a lot of new technology being developed. It was very exciting. And that sort of consolidated down into a small number of big players going after a small number of big customers, which is the U.S. government or some of our other allied governments. That was pretty steady business for those contractors for about a decade or so. And now all this technology is kind of waterfalling out, like a lot of military technologies do, where they eventually become commercialized. And as that happens, it changes and the applications change, and new uses are found for them, and new economic engines or economic drivers behind that are really drive and push the technology. I mean, just think of, obviously the internet or any of this other stuff that decades ago was really the purview of the government, and now has just truly changed the world. So that's where we're at now with this stuff. So, it's pretty exciting time. There's a lot of fast-moving parts, a lot of companies coming up with new ideas and new applications. So what I've been done the past year, I worked for a company called Fourth Wing. A colleague of mine, Greg Emmerich, is in the back corner of the room there. Maybe raise your hand, Greg, or stand up. If anybody's interested in talking to us about that, Greg's another great resource. Our primary application was precision agriculture. So we had developed a fixed wing, just a traditional airplane, the one that we've got out there in the lobby. Took that out. Farmers or other operators were able to use that to fly back and forth over a field, over their farm field, take many pictures, thousands of pictures, store all that on board, download it wirelessly to the laptop after the flight, and then go ahead and process those images. And they were able to do things like monitor their crops, get good, accurate estimates of how well the crop is growing, how many plants are coming up, or what level of maturity it is. There's specialized cameras on board that look specifically at crop health. They can look at different wavelengths of light, and in particular wavelengths of light that our human eyes can't see, but these cameras can see. And they can tell when a plant might be stressed or unhealthy versus a plant that is healthy or doing well. And all that is crucial information to farmers and growers around the country. And it doesn't take long looking at it dollars and cents wise. It starts to be a pretty compelling argument that there's a huge application here, and that's just for agriculture. And what we're doing now, this past year we worked for a company called Fourth Wing that was a subsidiary of a precision agriculture company in Mankato. Now we're looking at taking Fourth Wing and taking it independent. We're changing the name to Centera, and we're looking at expanding that into other applications and other industries as well. So not just agriculture, but infrastructure inspection, pipeline monitoring, maybe some of the things Patrick mentioned in terms of power lines and infrastructure, towers, and whatnot. So there's that, and then there's obviously the traditional military and security and public safety type applications that exist, and there'll be a market for that, continuing market for that as well.
Well, while we're on the topic of potential applications, anybody in the audience question on something they're working on or thinking about, or anything else? Oh, I got one over here.
So if a business gets a certificate of authorization to use drones, kind of twofold question. Is it limited? I mean, is it specific to that apply to use it for something specific, and is there parameters in that certificate? And then if so, how is that enforced?
What's it?
Thanks, Blake.
That's a very good question. Right now, the FAA regulates all that minutia that you just talked about. For civil use, you need to have a pilot's authorization, and you also have to specifically, when you apply for your certificate of authorization, you have to specifically apply where, with where you're going to fly it, what you're going to use it for, how high you're going to go, and if you get close to an airport, you have to have a transponder in it they're thinking about, and also that the airport is informed. The FAA reports that there's almost an incident with a UAV and a manned aircraft once a day. So this is the safety concern that they've got, that the pilots are reporting that they've had interactions with these UAVs. So that's why right now this is a pretty strict process, and there haven't been a lot of authorizations granted. So, but they've even got the authorization form right on the website. You can go on and fill it out and apply it. But there haven't been a lot of permits issued. And
Patrick, what does your firm do in terms of keeping tabs and keeping up with all that?
Stay within the limits, which is 400 feet for now. There's been correspondence between our firm and the FAA with some of the founding fathers of the resellers and distributors locally, and play nice and understand that this is an evolving market, and don't get carried away with any reckless behavior. And an example is that the Minneapolis Police Department called our team, and when the All-Star game was going to be, here this past summer, and said, please don't fly any drones over the stadium, which is an obvious request. Well, my input there was, let's go down and introduce ourselves to the teams that, not do interdiction on this, but give them some familiarity and a comfort level involving the technology. So we did that, and the owner of our company and our team, Franco, in the back, a great pilot for the Phantom, went down and we did a demo for the Minneapolis Police Department and Homeland Security, and to show them what the technology can do. Hence, just getting the flinch factor a little bit out of the way, not calming or being part of the solution, but at least getting them to look at this as a resource and an asset, like Jeff has mentioned. And that's really my job now. I mean, we're a tadpole amongst the mountain gorilla in this whole technology phase of this. But where it's going to go is remarkable. And so we could sit here all day long and talk about this, and you can tell my voice is hoarse already from talking to the majority of you folks prior to the meeting here. But it's just an exciting time to be part of this, and we have to be credible, and hence that's why we brought Jeff in as a KOL, or a key opinion leader in this field, to give us advice and where to tread lightly. And of course we're not going to get too aggressive, but the potential is so wide open. It's just emerging technology that me being a biotech rep in the medical field and part of cutting edge developments in the past, that part of my career was a little flat, and this has subsidized a little bit of the growth aspect in a different field, and that's why I'm here.
I just want to add, sorry to interrupt, it was an excellent question. I just want to add a little bit to that and reiterate that it's very much an evolving thing. I mean, this was, for a long time there's been the RC airplane rules, or model aircraft rules, and a lot of the early small UAV or drones work was done under that. As it started to grow, the FAA got a little concerned that it was getting out of the hobby world and into more professional stuff, and how do we regulate that? They tried to put the brakes on things, said, okay, we're going to come up with some rules. That was really dragging out. Eventually, now that, the industry is marching forward, so they've got a big fire lit under their butt now. Yeah. So the thing with the COAs, that was 2 years ago, 2002. There was a new law. Congress passed the FAA Reauthorization Act 2002 that basically said you must do COAs, certificates of authorizations. Those are specifically for public entities, government operators. And then just now, and it's pretty exciting times now they've got a new process where commercial operators can essentially get a COA. It's not really a COA, but it's the same idea. They call it a Section 333 exemption. And they're starting to issue those. I mean, they just started a month or two ago, and they're starting to issue them as fast as they can. So, and this is to, to have some, they're trying to be accommodating, they're trying to be permissive. They just want to be sure that people are doing it safely. And for them, safety is absolute number one. Their motto is do no harm. So, but it's happening and it's coming and it's happening now. So it's good.
Evidently, the TGIF marketing person should have talked to you before. I had a question over here. Get back to her, and then I'll come over here, okay?
It's actually not a question. The Northland Community College in Three River Falls is probably have a drone maintenance program at least 3 to 5 years.
There you go.
So, and they're within the area of University of North Dakota.
Right.
The Predator program, but there's, we learned from Cherokee Community College, South Fort Worth. So it's, it's more prevalent, if you will, than the average person might realize.
And do you work there, or?
No, I work with Technical Ed, the American Technical Education.
Okay.
There you go.
Jim Rudka, the dean there, presented at a conference.
Okay. Well, I'm going to name you as the expert for today, so hold your hand up. If anybody wants more information, she's the expert. Okay, what do I got over here, Kevin?
So, two-part question. One, can you clarify, you had mentioned a stay below 400 feet guideline. Could you just clarify when you need a permit or a authorization from the FCC? I just went on a smartphone, and Amazon's got a drone for $80, and I realize it's probably a toy.
Right.
But they have one for the carrot. Carrot's $450. So I guess the follow-up question is, it's conceivable, how pretty soon we could just be buying these and flying for fun. You tell me that every one of those people needs an FCC authorization, and what's the enforcement like? How does someone turn one in if they see one in the air? All that stuff.
That's why the topic is one heck of an ambiguity. I'm going to pass that off to Jeff, because Jeff is an expert on that.
I'm not an
Patrick's a
expert
sales
on
guy,
anything.
so
Yeah. What can I do with my model aircraft? This is right off the FAA website. It says you can fly a model aircraft UAS at the local model aircraft club. You can take lessons and learn how to fly safely. You can contact the airport or control tower when flying within 5 miles of the airport. And you can fly a model aircraft for personal enjoyment. And it goes on and talks about the limits. The aircraft is flown strictly for hobby or recreational use. So you can't cross that line, if you will, into a business venture. The aircraft is operated in accordance with a community-based set of safety guidelines. I don't know any communities that have set guidelines, except there was a town in Colorado that was actually offering hunting license to shoot down drones. The aircraft is limited to no more than 55 pounds. Again, it talks about the community-based organization. Aircraft is operated in a manner that does not interfere with any manned aircraft. When flown within 5 miles of the airport, again, it talks about that restriction. So there are restrictions as far as the hobbyist goes, but there are a lot less. They're like flying a radio-controlled airplane. I've got.
So you don't need an FCC permit?
No, you don't.
Okay, and another one.
The second part of my question on Kevin, I'm going to add to that. So when you order something on Amazon, you order not a toy, a professional one for $5,000, they don't make you register that? So whoever's selling it to you doesn't have to register that with the FFA?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. So how are they going to police this? I mean, there's
It's a good question.
350 million Americans. We can just throw these things in the air at the same time. The police can't. How are they going to police it? What's the plan?
Well, that's why the FAA is so concerned about it. It's not concerned for the responsible hobbyists. They're concerned for the people that want to press the limits with this. So I think that that's their main concern, is safety of the public. And if you interfere with, like I said before, if there's an incident a day with a UAV and a manned aircraft, that's a lot of incidents. It's kind of like shaking a haystack and having needles fall out, because there's a lot of airspace.
Does the local police force understand the law?
No.
So how, what happens? Because they don't understand the law.
Well, the pilot,
How do they enforce it?
it's incident based. The pilots report it to the FAA, and they say the location, the time, and everything else. And the investigative process is, can you imagine the amount of investigators it would take to do that? So right now, there's really no sanctions, I would bet.
Okay,
So, oh.
hold on a sec. You
I was just going to add, just real quick. I mean, the law, again, this is evolving, and this is changing very quickly, and it's week to week sometimes. And the FAA certainly has a position, an opinion, and a policy statement, which is different than a law. I'm not a lawyer, so I shouldn't get too deep into this, but there's very much gray room, and the points you're bringing up are important about what does this mean. I think in the end, when this shakes out, and it's going to happen over the next year or two here, or continuing on, there's going to be a difference between what you're buying from Amazon for your own personal enjoyment, or flying around your backyard, or going to a hobby club, or whatever else, or taking to the beach, versus what a professional operator is going to buy. They're going to end up spending a lot more money for professional grade equipment. They're going to want some type of level certification anyway, and the FAA eventually is going to require that, or they are requiring it now. They're starting to now. So it's going to sort of shake out, and they're going to have a lot of I think what they're saying, one of the most popular gifts this Christmas was drones or whatever, at least the hottest topic, right? So there's no way the FAA can come down and say you can't throw a paper airplane in your backyard, which years ago I was at a conference and somebody asked that question and to a representative of the FAA, and their answer was, well, technically you have to ask us for permission. And it got a little contentious in the room, but that was they're trying to figure this out. So we'll get there.
Okay, so I got Eric, and then we'll come over here, and then you'll be third. Eric.
Gentlemen, thank you, Ray. The Europeans seem to have figured this out better than the U.S. Is there something that's different between the two countries other than not divided by language and everything else? But why do they have this thing figured out? They have commercial and consumer or recreational. It seems to be not a problem here.
Bureaucracy.
Different types of bureaucracy, right?
Yeah. And I think that's part of it. I think it's also part of it is the number of flights we have with aircraft of different varying sizes, from military to commercial to to the Cessna Pipers. So there's a lot more flights here than in Europe, and a lot more potential enthusiasts flying these drones. I hope that answers your question.
There a lot of European countries actually do require you to go get an RC pilot's license, and they've have for decades. And they put that in place before the rise of the drones and all these new toys came in place. So they're actually dealing with that on that front too. It used to be hobbyists would spend thousands of dollars to build a model airplane and go to fly it at their club, and they'd have to be licensed. So they've got a little bit of some existing regulation to lean on there a little bit, and some of them, to Jeff's point, they just have a little bit less of a constrained airspace problem than we have here. So
Okay, over here.
This question is for Todd. Specifically today, all these UAVs operate with a pilot, right? And ultimately, no one wants to fly these things. They want them to fly themselves. They want them to be pilotless. How far away are we from that practically? And then all the questions that were just asked, what monkey wrenches that throw?
yeah, thanks. It's a great question. And it's a can of worms question, but so really the word drone, and it kind of goes to the term drone, and why. So the Air Force is changed to call them remotely piloted vehicles. One, because they're the Air Force and they want their pilots to think like they're feel like they're pilots, but truly they are, even though they're not stick and ruddering, they're mouse and mousing around on a computer workstation on the ground. But there's always a pilot in the loop, and in terms of how the FAA is looking at that, just to dovetail on the conversation we just had, there is always a pilot in command. There is always a individual who is responsible, right? And so this idea, the word drones kind of implies autonomy or autonomous or a lot of these things, which is exciting if you're kind of a techie guy or a person. Might be scary to some folks depending on which science fiction movies you've watched, but the technology to do a lot more advanced autonomy is it's progressing, it's coming along. In some applications, it can be, there are applications where you could conceivably pre-program one of these things. In fact, a lot of the military large drones work this way. They're completely pre-programmed. They can just hit a button, get in their car, drive home, and sometime later that evening an airplane will take off and fly for a couple days around the world and do something. They don't have to have any human intervention if they wanted. But there always is somebody there watching things or monitoring things or helping to direct what's going to happen. So I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of full autonomy or fully autonomous things, and it kind of gets into this delivery drones. Amazon and Google working on delivery drones. There's so many unknowns in what that really means, and how are you avoiding obstacles like trees and houses, and how do you hit the front lawn and all that stuff. So lots of exciting work going on there, lots of exciting research, lots of things are being proven out. But I don't think that's happening next year. I think that's, I don't know, 10 years off. Who knows?
The DJI drone and back, the white one, can be programmed to do a flight pattern, but you have to program it.
Right.
So I don't know where the legality starts or stops, but when the battery dies, then it lands itself. But that can be done, and this was one of the very curious pieces of a simple piece of equipment that cost $3,000 that we could do. Someone could do that with in adverse weather like this without going outside. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, these things already operate at least partially autonomously. I mean, it isn't stick and rudder piloting. It's you program. So when we fly a field, it's GPS waypoints, and the airplane flies that all on its own. We're just watching it, making sure nothing goes wrong, and then we can hit a button when we want it to land. So
I got trying to keep this gentleman was next.
Jeff, you mentioned that there's perhaps an incident a day with a drone of some sort at the airports. And I would probably believe that with the vast number of private consumer drones in the air right now. Is there any data of how many of those incidents, percentage-wise, are caused by consumer-type products versus professional services, such as what these guys are doing? Is that
I don't have a clear-cut answer for you, but I would guess it's mostly non-commercialized, non-public type of drones or UAVs that are being used. And the reason is because there haven't been that many authorizations given. I mean, you can count them, the number of authorizations that are listed on the website of who they've authorized and where. So it's not a lot, but like Todd said, they continue to do this every day and authorize more. But I think if they're seeing that many frequencies already, that's what's concerning the FAA a lot. Is this is becoming a hobbyist things, and people are using UAVs for other things than just a hobby and flying into airspace that they shouldn't be.
So
Yeah,
is the legislation and the rulemaking, is that more focused on, in my opinion, I think it should be more focused on hobbyists or drones as a whole, because trickle down effect, if you license 1% of the people on the 99, is there any progress in that sort of not really changing how
There will be.
I hate to say it, but
Well, I'm sure there will be,
Yeah,
and
there will
the
be.
more that the more the advanced UAVs become, the more there's going to be scrutiny upon people, especially if they're using them, in an area that they shouldn't. And I believe that to be true. I think the commercial applications, they're really had to jump through so many hoops to get this authorization that they're going to follow the rules. You're right. I believe that's true.
Okay, actually, this guy over here.
I just wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about manufacturing. Is it basically overseas product that's coming in, or any U.S. manufacturing keeping up with the technology?
yeah. Well, you go ahead, man.
Briefly, I mean, and I'm not as articulate as Todd is. He's an engineer, but there were so many people interested in this. So here was my answer to that to people that wanted to know. DJI is what we resell. So they're manufactured in China. There's 2 distribution channels, one in Portland, Oregon, and one in Phoenix, and they're privately held. And this is evolving so quickly, like Todd has mentioned, that GoPro, which is the attachment, optic on that, is beginning in the Wall Street Journal to begin their own development of their own drones. So DJI has been more clandestine and not transparent to allow this to happen so quickly. There are 10 distributors throughout North America of DJI products. We are just one of 4 resellers locally in Minnesota, and hence look at all the commotion that's caused. So as this gets organized, there'll be more opportunity for manufacturing, batteries, all ancillary aspects of the industry. That's why I find it so fascinating.
And to what Patrick was talking about, DJI is this Chinese company that is now the largest UAV company in the world. They've sold, hundreds of thousands of some of these things. And 4 or 5 years ago, they didn't exist. So it's really, there's a lot of it overseas, for sure. And especially on the consumer end of things, or what you might call the prosumer end. On maybe the higher end stuff, there's still some good manufacturing here in the United States. A lot of this initial technology was all developed here 10, 20 years ago. The company I'm affiliated with, Centera, we were Fourth Wing. We manufacture them here in Minnesota. We design them here, we manufacture them here. It's the airframe, it's the cameras that go on board, the electronics on board, the autopilots and the GPS, the stuff that allows it to fly around. All that's manufactured in the U.S. and designed in the U.S. So. We've got a long history of it, and I think it's going to continue. The regulation piece of it is starting to break loose, and it's going to help enable a lot of this. But part of the reason, one, cost, but also the regulatory environment, it's allowed, a lot of this technology to kind of transfer to Asia. But there's both sides to it, really. That we work with a contract manufacturing company in southern Minnesota that builds pretty much the entire thing for us. So,
Todd, bring up the aggregate dollars involved with this that are the possibility. I mean, not the wish list, but the actual numbers. I mean, it's to the tune of 80 billion, or
yeah, I mean, maybe 8 billion or something. I mean, they're projecting the industry in general to be in the billions in the next 5 years, really. Right? I think 2019 is the number that a lot of people are kind of focusing on at being, and a large chunk of that is going to be the small unmanned aircraft for commercial purposes. A big piece will be the military stuff and the large things, just because each individual airplane is $100 million or something like that. But, for the small things, we're talking much larger volumes. I'm not sure what you guys are selling that Phantom for, but they're a couple $1,000, $2,000-3,000 fully loaded once you get everything you need for it. Our platforms are a little bit more expensive than that. They're maybe $10,000 going up to $20,000, but you're paying for more of a professional grade product to do a specific job, and that's really, I think, where the industry will be and where the manufacturing will be for that here in the United States.
I had a couple here. We're here, and I'll go you next.
So thanks everyone for being here. A really interesting topic. I want to offer a couple of things. One, I want to bring up Google and their driverless car and sort of the development of that. And then thinking about that in the framework of the rules and the law around driving, right? And sort of what we can learn from that. And then I want to offer counterpoints on the legislative area. So I think that the private sector, the companies, the consultancies within this industry can do the best job in setting an environment where it'll be safe and where it'll be profitable. And I think rushing to regulate, rushing to legislate without key learnings can be kind of a dangerous thing. And I suppose you might hear that from some of the advocacy groups. I don't know how many there are in this industry. I guess those are some of the things I want you to comment on, just comparing roads and the regulations there, and then the evolution of the Google person's car, and then can free market, can all these companies and consultants, can they do this safely, securely, without an overreaching government?
Hence lies the magic question.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think you're right that the corporations that are using technology and advancing technology in both fields, whether that be automobiles or unmanned aircraft, I think that those things are industry or technology driven. And I do think that they have a very great input into the safety of what happens. But unfortunately, in our society and how it's become, with whether it's the Department of Transportation or the FAA, they're concerned about our safety. So in the guise of our safety, they have a tendency to overreact, to instill regulations and laws that are very restrictive. It's just not on a federal level. States, our own state government has looked at legislations for drones. Right now they haven't passed it yet. And communities even are looking at legislation. So it's a multiple effect. And unfortunately, if you get the federal government and then the state government and then the local counties and communities pressing more restrictions, that's where it becomes troublesome. And I think the industries need to take an active role in petitioning their legislative representatives to listen. I agree with you.
You make a really good point too about the industry, is good, will be good at sort of, laying this out themselves. I mean, the industry is moving way faster than the government can move on this now, right? I mean, it is. So just think about the safety features. We haven't talked that much about the safety features that are in these things. It isn't just a remote control airplane. They've got GPSs on boards. They've got full autopilots on board. So, the big question is, what happens when you lose control link? Well, it's been for a lot of years now that the autopilot can automatically fly the airplane back and land where it took off from or wherever the safety point is. So it's now, that's been standard for a decade now. And so now every time you apply, you say, okay, you have to have a lost link procedure. It has to come in and land. Okay, if you got that box, great. What's the next thing? The new thing that's happening now is geofencing. So the idea that when you take off, you can have a geofence programmed in to the vehicle. You program that on your control station on the ground, you upload it to the vehicle. It says, okay, if anything goes wrong or if it goes beyond this geofence, this plane, so let's say you're doing it for a, hypothetically, inspecting some real estate, like flying over a house or looking at the roof for roof damage because of hail damage, or you're flying a farm field. And you might set that up, the boundaries of that property. And there's a GPS on board. If the airplane flies at or near that boundary, it just automatically triggers a fail-safe, comes back and lands. So that technology is now becoming more and more standard. And what's the next thing? The next thing is going to be having these kind of spherical cameras or spherical sensors that can actually measure when it gets close to an object and either just stop, or if it's a hovering aircraft like the ones here, they can just stop and hover, or if it's something else, maybe it changes altitude or it comes back and lands, or whatever it is. So the three things I just mentioned here, I mean, that was all every 2 years one of these a new piece comes out. So it moves much faster, and so yeah, there's got to be some room for that.
Okay, so here's the deal. I try to keep it at 1 o'clock. I think we're about there. With that said, I have the room as long as we want it. So as long as the panelists can stay, we can keep the room. I know we had questions over here I didn't get to, questions here and some over there, but I also want to be considerate of everybody's time at 1 o'clock. So let's thank the panel.